creamy centre, so you better get your new Polly Waffle. Polly Waffle. Polly Waffle, Polly, what's a mouthful?
New Polly Waffle with an extra creamy centre. What a mouthful.
What a mouthful. Polly Waffle. What a mouthful. Get into a new taste, get into your new Polly Waffle. Polly Waffle. Polly Waffle, Polly, what's a mouthful? A creamy, creamy centre, so you better get your new Polly Waffle. Polly Waffle. Polly Waffle, Polly, what's a mouthful?
New Polly Waffle with an extra creamy centre. What a mouthful.
What a mouthful. Polly Waffle. What a mouthful.
There we go. There is our Polly Waffle theme song. What a mouthful. Soft and creamy in the centre. I wonder if our next guest is soft and creamy in the centre. I have with me the lovely Scot MacDonald. How are you this morning, Scot?
Good morning, Maxine. Very good, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. What a gorgeous day. It is going to be a stinking hot week.
Later in the week, yeah.
Now, you coming all the way from New England way. Not much rain out there.
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, as I was saying before, we're not the worst. We're probably not the best. So we're in a pretty safe area up at the top of the tablelands. We tend to get a bit of weather come in from the coast. And so we probably didn't have the worst of the drought. It's still a bit stressful for our farmers, but we're not in as bad a position as some of those places around Tamworth and those sorts of areas.
Yeah. Now, Scot, people know you around town here because you do a lot for us in terms of being the Parliamentary Secretary for Planning at the Central Coast and the Hunter. Huge region, absolutely huge. So you're a member of the Legislative Council, which is the MLC behind your name. And we'll get to that a bit later. But I'm interested in how did you get to this? Because you're a local New England boy. How did you get to be an MLC?
Yeah, look, a bit of a long story, and I'll try and keep it short. I had a couple of goes at running. I actually ran against Tony Windsor back in, I think it was about 2004. And then, look, I didn't, I guess, have too many opportunities at a local level. I'm a Liberal, living in probably National Party land.
Very much so.
Yeah, and sort of became a bit obvious to me that there probably wasn't a lot of opportunities at the lower house level. So I started to engage with the party to run in what we call the upper house or the Legislative Council. And that took me a couple of goes, but I got there in 2011.
Goodness me, I'm looking at, if you get onto the site, which is parliament.newsouthwales.gov.au, and I tell you what, it's really interesting reading what, the Legislative Assembly is, what the Legislative Council is. But goodness me, you have had numerous roles throughout your tenure there. Yes, very much so.
Look, and that's not that untypical. When you get elected, you tend to get thrown onto committees, and it is a good way to learn how Parliament works. You get to meet a lot of stakeholders. Like we've met, I've been on coal seam gas was one of the first couple of inquiries I was on. That was very, very, I guess, tense or emotional. But everything from green slip reform right up to national parks. So it's a good way of sort of learning, as I say, how Parliament works, how government works, what the community sort of is wanting from you or not happy about. So it's a good role. And then Mike Baird appointed me Parliamentary Secretary for the Central Coast and the Hunter back in May 2015, I think it was. And it's been pretty fast and furious ever since, I've got to say.
Yeah, I can imagine. And as you said, you are a Liberal in National Country there. When did you join the Liberal Party out of interest?
Look, my wife and I had a business, seed and fertiliser and grain business up in Guyra. We bought it in 1989. We ran it for 20 years, but I started to become interested in politics a little bit later, so I wasn't your sort of typical, university person who lives and breathes politics. It sort of came to me a bit later. I was getting frustrated with a few things. There was a lot of what I thought was bureaucratic red tape sort of holding me back. We had a very big shock back in the early 90s when the wool reserve price scheme collapsed, and that was a big blow to the wool-growing regions where I'm from. They went from being very, I guess you'd say, sort of productive and wealthy areas to suddenly, literally almost within weeks, but certainly within months, people found their incomes halved or even
Wow.
went down to about a third. So the Wool Reserve Price Scheme was a government scheme invented in the 80s, I think it was, to prop up the wool industry. And it was done for sort of, I guess, good intentions, but like a lot of government schemes, in the end it overshot, and there was too much wool around and the thing collapsed, as I say, and that really was challenging for us and our business. It nearly sent us to the wall, I've got to say. We recovered from it, and you know, we did quite all right in the end, but we had a number of years in the sort of early 90s, mid-90s, when life was pretty tough, I can tell you, to pay the wages, to pay the rent and do those sorts of things. So that sort of got my juices going, if you want to say it that way politically. You know, what the bloody hell is government up to, and why is it making life so miserable for me at that time in the early 90s?
Sure.
So that's what got me interested.
That's what got you interested. And I'd say that's where a lot of people that we talk to locally have seen some problems, seen some issues, and thought, look, I need to stand up and sort this out, not just for myself, but my community as well. So
yeah, not untypical story. Yeah, whether it be local, state or federal, that's quite often where people come at it. You know, they've had a personal experience or business experience or a family, community matter that really has been a bugbear for them or whatever, and off they go. And look, for some people, it might be one issue and they either resolve it or they don't and they move on. For other people, but like myself, I sort of probably got more and more involved in it. I started at a pretty basic local branch level and did those things that people do at those levels, and then got more interested in someone taps you on the shoulder one day and says, look, why don't you have a go running for this? And I say I had a few false starts and then and finally got there in 2011.
I can also see that you're very active in the Rotary Club of Guyra as well, which is a great sort of start to get your toe into the community to see what issues are about and what needs to be done.
Look, absolutely, and I had no interest in politics when I joined, and Rotary was very good, I say, to understand what's happening in your community, help your community. But look, I'll also say Rotary was very good for me, even just in terms of public speaking. So I'd never done any public speaking before, but you join a Lions or a Rotary or a CWA or whatever it is, and sooner or later someone tells you to stand up and make a speech. So I went from, you know, absolutely dreading that and hating that to being a lot more comfortable at it. So that was, in many ways, a good sort of training, if you like, for a bit more involvement in public life.
And your job, your role also, because you do such a huge region as well, you're on the road quite a bit. You're out chatting with people, chatting with communities, but you're also having to go down to Parliament down in Sydney as well.
Yeah, look, we sit, I think it's about 28 or 30 weeks a year, and people, I often get the reaction, oh, you only sit for 28 weeks of the year, so the rest of the time you must be on holiday.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Look,
That's when you do the real work.
Yeah, like I thought I worked pretty hard in my small business for 20 years, and we were sort of about 6 days a week, you know, from 7 to 6 at night sort of thing, and farmers ring you all hours a day and night.
Sure.
But look, you know, most politicians, and I will say this from Labor and Liberals and National and Greens, 90% of politicians work pretty hard. You know, yes, we've got some duds, and yes, we've got some ones that probably should be doing something else. But like most life that you come across, most people put their shoulder to the wheel and work pretty hard. And I'll say that for all political parties. You know, yes, there's the odd one or two that, as I say, should be doing something else. But look, yeah, you get out there, you meet, you talk. I do about 55,000 kilometres a year.
Wow.
Most of it in northern New South Wales and 100 in the Central Coast. So yesterday I drove from Guyra to Foster and back. That was about a 9-hour return drive.
Wow, yeah, huge.
And yet, look, you know, I will say probably a little bit more in the last few weeks and months, particularly around the drought, particularly in places like Moree and Bathurst. It gets very emotional, it gets very tough, people get very stressed, and quite often you'll go out as a politician and you don't have an immediate answer or an immediate bucket of money, if you like, to throw at someone's concerns, but you just listen. People have got someone to talk to, and explain, you know, what's happening in their life, and you do take that back. You know, I guess I am fortunate. I relay those things to the Premier. The way I do it is usually I'll just text the Premier and say, look, I've been at Moree and people are feeling pretty stressed, and they may want a bit of help in this way or that way. Have a think about it, and usually I'll get a text back saying thanks for that, and we'll have a think about that sort of thing. So never, I guess, if you're out in the community, doesn't matter if you're Budgewoi or you're Bathurst or you're wherever you are, talk to your councillor, talk to your state member of parliament, talk to your federal member of parliament. You just might be surprised. Not every time a switch gets switched and something gets happened, but it all helps. It just sort of feeds in and builds a picture for ministers and the government, the council, about what's happening on the ground. And I guess, we were talking about this before we went on air, Maxine. I will say, I think I'm like most politicians. If you come to me with a problem, well, that's good. If you can come to me with a problem and a suggestion, that's a lot better.
Sure.
Again, doesn't matter if that's the roundabout, the road, the school, the hospital, or drought, or whatever it might be. Usually we're generally fairly, across what the issue is, but we're keen to hear how you think it should be solved, sort of thing. So
you really need that communication from from the community, and for people to work out, well, what is the problem, and communicate that to you. And as you say, you might not have the solution there and then, but if it can get thrown around and thought about, the more minds on it, we can come up with some solutions. Yeah.
And look, Australia, believe it or not, is still a pretty small place, and I'll always remember one saying Tony Windsor had, and I didn't agree with Tony on a lot of things, but this one: the world is made up from people who turn up. So I always love going to. I've been to the Mount Hunt and Windale Residents Association.
Yes,
so you go along to that, and there might only be 10 or a dozen people there, 15 people, whatever it is. But they thrash the issue out. They sort of have a bit of a debate. Again, not everybody agrees on everything. Some of it's negative, but some of it's positive. But they're a voice, and then they go to me or they go to council and with some ideas. And I do know that groups like that make a difference. So they mightn't get everything, but they do have an influence. So it's hard work. Even just going to that Rotary or going to that residents association, whatever, or that PNC at school, or the football club, or soccer, whatever, netball club. But I tell you, if you're involved, you're more likely to have some influence.
Exactly. Fantastic. And people can get onto you by emailing you, and I've found that you guys to be very approachable in whatever concern that you might have to email you. How else can people contact you?
Look, email I find is always best. And Kit here in the office picks up my emails if I'm on the road.
He's fantastic. I tell you what, if you can get onto Kit, you've half your problem solved.
Well, he does the work. I just take the credit.
No, it's great to have that team behind you, and a lot of people don't realise that the mechanics behind you as a person. There is a big team, and there is a machine working behind you as well to make sure that these things get done.
Yeah, and the public do expect to be responded to, and I'll tell you, that's one thing I've noticed in my 8 years. I came in 2011. There's a lot more, obviously, social media. The people are on email, and, I'll get an email at midnight at night, sort of thing, talking about someone's issue. Now, we mightn't get back to them immediately, but, we will get back to them, and particularly if it's put in a good sort of constructive way, then, but we do need a team behind us, because government is complex, particularly some of the larger portfolios like school or health or roads and things like that. Quite often the solution is not obvious, and it takes a bit of delving into. You've got to find the right person in the department who probably knows the history of whatever the issue is, and then, build up some interest, and then try and get some ministerial or government sort of interest in what's going on. So it can take a bit of time. It can be complex, and the world is not like the movies. You identify something and you've got a solution in the next scene or the next frame. So,
exactly.
It takes a bit of work, takes a bit of grinding.
It does. And you've touched on a few of those topics that we often get when we ask our listeners if they can come up with some questions for you. And often they are about affordable housing, they're about,
Yep.
infrastructure, they're about, public transport. So I have a few questions here from listeners who are, very invested in our community and making it work. So I have here from Dave, what is the government's attitude to developing a dedicated performing arts high school on the Central Coast to facilitate the incredible local talent we have? I'll tell you what, you know, Scott, we have incredible local talent here.
Yep.
So we obviously have Hunter School Performing Arts up in Broadmeadow.
Up the road, yep, and we just invested a bit more money up there. I think it was $4 or $5 million in a new theatre. That old thing up there is...
And it is spectacular up there, absolutely.
Yep, yeah.
There is a private school, I know, a performing arts down on the Central Coast.
Right.
That has only recently just opened.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that.
Are there plans for a dedicated?
Look, I've got to say no. Look, a few reasons. One is, I guess you've touched on the one up there at the Hunter, and I appreciate that's a long way for some people to travel. The school, I guess the school design is really now, hard to describe this, but they're very much reliant on population projections. So population ebbs and flows a little bit. Generally, the Central Coast is increasing. That's not the case in all parts of the Central Coast. It would be very difficult now for the Department of Education to justify building a school dedicated to the performing arts or focusing on the performing arts. To get a high school that reaches, I guess, the best performance, I'm told, has to be up around 900, 1,000 odd students. So the days of having high schools of 400 or 500 or 600, we're just not signed up to that anymore. To get the best staffing, the best resources, the best use of capital expenditure. So I would see it as being very, very difficult to justify a school where that's its main focus. As I say, if you want to have the best high school, and that's generally up around those numbers of 900 or 1,000 or more, is there sufficient interest at the performing arts to get up there? I would think, no doubt, there'd be 200 or 300 or even 400, but above that, it'd be very difficult. So the Department of Education today, I think, I'll take a lot of convincing that they could or should be going down that path.
And this is how decisions are made, isn't it, Scott? I mean, it's multifactorial. It's very complex. You've got to take into consideration a lot of things. Everyone would love, certain infrastructure.
Sports high school or a performing arts one.
But you've got to put the pen to paper and work out, is it going to work out with the community? And I guess it's a bit like the discussion, that I have with my husband. Should we put a pool in? How much is it going to cost? Who's going to be here in 5 or 10 years to enjoy it?
What's it going to do to the value of your home and that sort of thing?
Who's going to look after it?
and look, I think one of the things in all these government decisions, again, coming back to roads or schools or hospitals, whatever it might be, whatever you do, is say you go spend $10 million on a performing arts high school for 500 kids on the Central Coast, that means you haven't got that money to have a more substantial high school somewhere else. So every government decision has consequences, and we're all quick, I think, to identify the positives or the best part of it, but that, there's only a certain pool of money, so that means around, and of course we always look at it from our particular personal perspective, our family perspective, our community perspective. We don't think about it as electorate-wide or region-wide or even state-wide. So I guess that's why you have governments, that they're tasked to do that. Mostly I hope we get it right. Sometimes we get it wrong. We certainly hear about it when we get it wrong, as we should.
Sure.
But yeah, so that would be my view. I think I've seen a little bit of media on the performing arts idea. At this stage, I don't think it's got legs.
Okay, that's very interesting. Now, a lot of people are a bit upset about privatisation, especially services like the buses. And we have constant issues around our community here about the bus services since it has been privatised. What can we do to sort out this issue?
Yeah, look, I guess I've got to dial it back about a year or even 2 years ago. The state government came to the view that the bus service was in decline, and we'd lost, I think it was about 100,000 passengers off the bus service. Public public utilisation of the public transport was under 3% in the Hunter, so quite low, very low. It's no doubt suited some community parts of the region very well. Others, it just wasn't performing. So, look, the state government really had two choices. Business as usual, try and improve what we had, try and get the numbers back on the buses, not upset the apple cart, if you like. Or we took the alternative decision to go to a private operator and say, how can we build the numbers back up on the bus system, the ferry system, and the train system, and soon to be the light rail system. So look, we took that decision. We gave it to Keolis Downer after a competitive tender process. They have got expectations on them that they will build the bus numbers back. And look, Maxine, I've certainly heard and been there when they made their first changes. I think it was late last year. That certainly upset a lot of people, and I think you might know I went to that meeting at Belmont with 1,000 people,
yes.
and was left in no doubt about people's feelings about that, And look, some of them were very strong personal stories about a disabled child or some elderly person finding it difficult to get to the shops or the doctors or whatever it might have been, or the child getting to school and those sorts of things. So look, we went back to KD and said, there are some bumps in this. You need to work it out. They made some changes. I think it was about July. I will say I'm getting less now. It seems to have settled down quite a bit. I'm not pretending that it's perfect or gone away. I think, and I've had discussions with Keolis Downer about this only as recently as about a fortnight ago, saying, you've probably got some more tweaking to do on this. But also, I will say, Maxine, I think the transport picture is changing a lot. So the days, was traditionally we had a bus turn up at a certain time, you knew it, and it got to you at a certain destination at a certain time. The world, as we know it, is being disrupted, whether we like it or not as a government or the community. And so we're experimenting with the on-demand services. So the public will be using private and public on-demand services. So they're using things like, of course, Uber more, and there'll be more and more of that. And that'll be in the cars, that'll be in the bikes, that'll be in the electric bikes. And we're trialling the on-demand buses. And my discussions with KD, as I say, about a fortnight ago, I asked, how's it going? They said it's going strongly. And then they made a comment that really surprised me. And they said, do you know who some of the biggest users are? And they said it was some of the seniors people. So it was totally different to what I thought. I mean, I've been on it once, and as I thought, there was a lot of young people on there with their iPhones booking it, and that's what you would expect. But KD are reporting, Keolis Downer are reporting, after the peak hour, so not 8:30 in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning, but after that peak is gone, the retirees, if you like, are jumping on their phones or even their computers, I'm not sure, and booking to go up to Charlestown or further afield. And it suits them. They're leaving home at 10 o'clock. The bus is out their front door or close nearby, taking them up to the shops. It suits them. So I think number one, we'll see more of this. I think there'll be expectations of more and more of this, and we as a government have to be in that space. So I believe over time, I'm not saying tomorrow or next year, but I think if we're having this conversation in 5 years' time, we will be talking about an expanded on-demand network, both private and public, or the Keolis Downer model, where we pay the bill and Keolis does the operation. So I think, business as usual just was not going to work.
Very interesting.
And we had to adapt and change. Have we got it perfect? Definitely not. We need to keep adapting and changing and listening to people about where it's not working, and I hope that we will get there.
That is, that's good news for all of us who do use public transport, because we really do need to use it, get out of the cars and start using the public transport. We have the infrastructure here in place. We've just got to get those timings right. And as you say, this is, we're working differently now in the world, and all of this on-demand Uber stuff, we have to get on board.
Yeah, and it's not like we've got a choice. It's not like we can say as a government, go away Uber or go away bike sharing or electric bike sharing or whatever it might be. These things are coming. We had a company in here from I forget where it was, at Norway or Denmark the other day. They want to bring in their ride-sharing electric bikes. So again, that doesn't suit everybody, but it's a big thing in their part of the world. I said to them, go up to Lake Macquarie and Newcastle, because I actually think it'd be more suitable there than Sydney. It's a more of a contained, I guess, community. In some ways, they're proving they're more receptive to a lot of these technology. You've got one council in Lake Macquarie, you've got one council in Newcastle that can deal with them and all the issues that they do bring in terms of where you dock these bikes and all those sorts of things. But, we can't stand still. The world is not going to be like it was 20 years ago, and that's very challenging.
It is challenging for everyone.
If you've got a taxi, you know, the taxi world is not the world it was even 5 years ago. So
definitely.
they're having to adapt. You know, their business model is got to be more flexible. It's about the customer. It's about disruption, and it's coming.
Very interesting. Scott, it's been an absolute delight chatting with you and chatting about you as the person and what you're doing in our community. So I do appreciate all the hard work that you do put in, and hopefully our community will feel that they can approach you with some issues or solutions and become more involved with making it all work.
Yeah, and Maxine, thanks for the chat. Love to come on again. I just sent you through my my request. It's called Great Southern Land.
Oh,
I don't know if you got that one.
Fantastic. Oh, yes. That. Do you know what? We share a favourite song. There we go. Gankajang.
I'll give you a very, very quick background. I lived for the UK in a year. I won't say when. It was too long ago. And I used to hear that radio and the song come over on the radio, and made me very, very homesick.
Oh, look, it's still I still bust with pride with this song. It's absolutely fantastic song.
So your millennials mightn't know it too well, but for us a little bit older, it's got a lot of sentimental value to it.
Well, look, I'm one. If we ever have to change the anthem, this is going to be
our
new anthem. I tell you what, Scott, lovely having you on.
Okay.
Get back to work. Get back to building a better future for Hunter and Central Coast. We thank you for all your help. Thanks so
Maxine.
much. Cheerio.
All the best.
Bye. Bye.